Well, many of us were shocked at the live Instagram feed of musician Bongekile Semelani, known as Babes Wadumo, being beaten up by her boyfriend, Kwaito star Mandla Mapumulo, or Mampintsha. Many people on social media commented that this happens to women all the time in South Africa, but there is only an outcry when it is a celebrity. And why isn't there a big outcry all of the time? So what's the psychology around this outcry? Why are we more concerned about domestic violence happening to a celebrity as opposed to an ordinary person? Well, with us to discuss this further, we've got the president of the Pan-African Psychology Union, Dr. Saths Cooper, in studio with us. Good to have you. Thank you very much for joining us. Why are we more concerned when it comes to celebrities as opposed to just, you know, an event that happens all the time with just your average Joe?
Well, I think we confront those issues on a daily basis and don't expect it to happen to people in the limelight, whether they're leading figures in society, whether they're business people, whether they're politicians or celebrities. We expect that they would be saved this pandemic of violence. And when we get such incidents happening, it brings us to Mother Earth that none of us is safe from that scourge, because largely we've been socialized by it. So we've been socialized into accepting it. We've been socialized into regarding it as part of our lives, because that's how we've been brought up, that's how we've seen it happen around us, and to make an excuse that I reached the end of my tether is so easy, especially when it comes to children and women and the other vulnerable populations out there.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the question also needs to be asked is, how interested are we in ordinary people and their lives? And, you know, do we give as much attention and care as much?
Oh, no, we don't.
No?
We don't. We actually have become so much narcissistic in a sense. We're so much absorbed, and heaven knows our lives are stressful and we have to make ends meet at a terrible rate. But we're so absorbed with our own issues that those around us and their needs, especially children, growing young people, we tend to ignore. And the result is some of those kinds of things that happen in the schools environment, that happen in the social environment, because we're largely self-absorbed as a people. And yet we come from a past where we ought to know better. We ought to know that the kinds of things that happened amongst us, to us in the past, we should not be repeating in any way in our current dispensation, because there are other ways to deal with the challenges that we confront in everyday life.
Yeah, and you know, it also looks to the fact that, I mean, ever since yesterday, it wasn't yesterday, the weekend's events unfolded, and we, you know, saw this live video footage taking place. So many other things have been shared, and people have been posting pictures and saying, yeah, but look what happened to this woman, and look what happened to this one at the hands of her boyfriend, and this one, and this one, and this one. And yet they fall through the cracks, even though it's still on social media, it's made public, it's out there, but the reaction is not there. I don't see them in the newspapers. I don't see people talking about them, and I don't see our interview even focusing in that direction. It's on one thing and one thing only. It's the celebrity couple, and almost waiting to see what's next, how is this going to play out, and the downfall of who?
Well, don't we need a Me Too movement here?
Yeah.
We need young people and older people to stand up, especially women, to say no more. It's not in our name. We're going to put a stop to it. I mean, we've discussed this before.
Yeah.
We'll come to December this year and declare 16 days. The scourge is so deep that we need to look at it very, very differently. Indeed, our education system needs to incorporate this. Instead of that dry stuff that they give the kids that has sometimes little meaning in their lives, we need to change relationships. We don't teach relating in school, and we leave it to peer pressure. We leave it to bad socialization to repeat the behavior patterns which we're now seeking to remediate. Let's start early, in early childhood and primary education. That's where it can make a difference. Our kids at that age are so vulnerable. They're also open they are innocent, they're open to difference, open to affirming their own integrity, their own humanity, and respecting that of others. Let's give them that opportunity.
Yeah. I want to also focus a little bit on this group mentality, the psychology behind it. And when we talk about group mentality, I mean, we'll take, for instance, yesterday, where there was this major movement by everybody on social media, off social media, whether it be, you know, on television, on radio, or just a conversation. Where is Mampintsha? When is he going to hand himself in? And everybody sort of do the right thing. Come on, we just want to talk to you. You know, that sort of movement until he finally appears. And then it's like, okay, we've won this battle. What's our next battle? What is this group mentality that we abide by?
Well, I think it's because we've been so defeated in our lives at all angles, you know, whether it's in the work environment, whether it's in the recreational environment, in the personal space. We're a depressed people that looks out there and sees hopelessness. So when we find something like this to cotton on to and get coaxed into being part of, which is a good thing, by the way, because it's not quite the mob mentality where you want to take revenge, which is another kettle of fish. But here it's a positive move because people are investing their resources and time in this thing. However, it needs something more. To move from one campaign to another does not help. I think men need to stand up and say, we don't do this, and not allow the lone voices to be out there, and not to defend. There can be no excuse for beating up children, beating up women, beating up elderly.
There certainly isn't, but there's almost this mentality that we've become immune to it, and every single guest I've spoken to has agreed with this mentality, and that, you know, I think I've said it about 3 or 4 times this week, that these stories don't get into newspapers. They don't make the news. I mean, you will have a woman beaten to death, and it's barely spoken of. Yet when it's a celebrity, it's a different story. But are we becoming immune to these stories? We live in such a vicious and violent society that you brush it off.
We've become inoculated to most kinds of violence. And when it is violence against children and women and the elderly, more so, because our image of those 3 groups is diminished. It's a fractured image. It is wrong socialization. And the result is, when it happens to those who male figures feel are lesser beings, it doesn't matter. And that's how young boys are growing up. And indeed, a lot of young girls are beginning to internalize that status of being lesser beings. It's about time we change that. We're all equal. We need to affirm self and other humanity without let.
Talk to us about the mind of an abuser and the mind of the one being abused. You know, yesterday, again, I bring up the story. We saw Mampintsha eventually getting into court. He was then released on 2,000 Rand bail. He then, you know, decided to speak to the media and speak to the cameras and saying, you know, yes, I did hit her, but she's been hitting me all the time. You know, I'm also a victim of abuse, and now he's laid a counter charge. What goes on there?
Well, this is somebody who cannot acknowledge his own issues. This is a very small man. He utilizes his control, his status. It seems he's a manager. It seems he has some control over this unfortunate woman. He is a bully and will only do that to the person he has some control over. Anybody else, he will be a little cringing man. It doesn't matter his size, or doesn't matter how much the bluster will emanate from his mouth, but this is an insecure individual in need of help. He's not a man.
Yeah. And also the idea that, you know, many people have been speaking about the family of Babes Wadumo, and we do sympathize with them, but it goes to say as well that a lot of families and a lot of friends are fully aware that their daughter or their friend is in an abusive relationship, and they turn a blind eye to it. I mean, we've heard her family speak out and say they knew this abuse was happening. In fact, it happened in front of them, but she was still with them.
Yeah. Well, look, the abused woman syndrome is legend. For all sorts of reasons, women feel they need to be in it. When it has a serious overlay of narrow cultural patterns, there's a place for us as women, and we don't need to upset the apple cart, particularly if he may be a breadwinner or a significant giver in that sense. But generally, I think that women need to assert themselves in some way. They need the support of their family and close ones to do that. Otherwise, they'll fall within the cracks. And very clearly, Sibongile has done that. By outing this video, I think she's taken a stand which says, this has been happening to me, I'm not going to tolerate it, I'm making the world see it, because I have not had the necessary support, and to hell with it.
Let's leave it there for this morning. Thank you so much for talking to us. The President of the Pan-African Psychology Union, Dr. Saths Cooper, talking to us about this group mentality in relation to the Babes Wadumo domestic violence incident and other issues.